So today we're talking about something so old and so massive, it almost defies belief. We're talking about the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's one of the last wonders of the ancient world still standing, and you know what? It is absolutely packed with mysteries that scientists, even today, are still trying to figure out. So, yeah, let's get into it. First off, you've got to try and wrap your head around just how old this thing is. I mean, 4,500 years. For 4.5 millennia, this monument has just stood there. It's survived scorching deserts, insane storms, you name it. There is literally nothing else on Earth this old and this huge that's still around. It's like a ghost from a world we can't even really imagine.
And the size is just staggering. The Great Pyramid weighs something like 6 million tons. Now, to give you some perspective, think about the tallest building in the world right now, the Burj Khalifa. That thing weighs about 500,000 tons. So yeah, the pyramid is more than 10 times heavier. That's just wild.
So, that brings us to the big question, right? The absolute core of the mystery. How on earth did an ancient civilization, with no cranes, no bulldozers, not even a simple wheel for moving stuff, build something this colossal? That is the puzzle we are going to try and piece together. So, before we can even begin to tackle the how, we've got to understand the why. I mean, what could possibly drive an entire society to take on a project this massive? Well, it all comes down to their incredibly powerful beliefs about what happens after you die. So the ancient Egyptians had this core belief in an afterlife. They believed that after you died, your soul went on this journey to an underworld to be judged. And to make sure their pharaoh made it through and became immortal, they built these incredible tombs, these eternal homes. They packed them with everything the pharaoh could possibly need. We're talking food, treasures, furniture, the whole shebang, all to guarantee a successful trip to the next world. Basically, the bigger and better the tomb, the better your shot at immortality. Now, the Great Pyramid specifically was built for a pharaoh named Khufu, way back around 2560 BC. It's the biggest of the big three you see at Giza, right next to the pyramids for his son and grandson. And here's the thing. Archaeologists did find a stone sarcophagus deep inside, but it was empty. Whatever incredible treasures it was supposed to protect were probably looted centuries, maybe even thousands of years ago. Okay, let's get into the real pyramid builders. Because for centuries, the story we've all heard is that it was built by slaves, right? A story of misery and forced labor. But is that really what happened? Let's debunk a pretty old myth. Yeah, this idea that slaves built the pyramids, it's been around for a really long time. It actually comes from the Greek historian Herodotus way back in the 5th century BC. And ever since then, it's just been repeated over and over in books, movies, you name it. But what if that whole story is just plain wrong?
Well, the thing is, the actual archaeological evidence we have today, it says something completely different. It totally contradicts that old story. So the big question is, if it wasn't slaves, who in the world built this thing? Turns out, the pyramids were built by a huge workforce of about 20 to 30,000 skilled Egyptian laborers. And get this, they weren't slaves at all. They were actually respected workers. They lived in these entire cities built just for them, right near the construction site. And they were fed really, really well. So well, in fact, that their skeletons show they were often healthier than the average Egyptian citizen. You should think of it more like a massive national project. You had farmers and people from all over Egypt pitching in during the off-season. They were all united, loyal to the pharaoh. This was a huge deal, a matter of national pride, and, for them, a religious duty. All right, so now we've got this picture of a highly organized, super motivated workforce. I mean, the fact that they could even organize something like that tells you a ton about the power of ancient Egypt. And that power, it was put to the test engineering what seems impossible. So let's look at how scientists think they actually did it. Okay, so this whole insane task really boils down to 3 huge challenges. First, you got to cut millions of giant stone blocks. Second, you have to somehow move those blocks to the pyramid site. And third, you have to lift them all into place, sometimes hundreds of feet up in the air. This is where their ingenuity just shines. So for the limestone, which is a softer stone and makes up most of the pyramid, they could get by with copper tools. But for the granite, the super hard granite they used for the inner rooms, they had this amazing trick. They would literally pound the rock with even harder stones, these things called dolerite stones. Then they jam wooden wedges into any cracks and soak them with water. And as that wood soaked up the water and expanded, pop! It would split the granite right apart. So clever.
Okay, so they've got the blocks cut. But how do you move these massive things across miles of desert sand with no wheels? Well, in 2014, a team of physicists came up with a brilliant answer, and it was inspired by an ancient painting. The painting showed a worker pouring water on the sand right in front of a giant sledge carrying a statue. For years, people thought it was just part of a ceremony. Turns out, it was the key. And here's the physics behind it. And it's so smart. That team of physicists found that just the right amount of water, we're talking just 2 to 5%, makes the sand firm. It basically stops the sand from piling up in front of the sledge, and it cuts the friction way down. This one simple trick literally cut the effort needed to pull a multi-ton block in half. It made the impossible suddenly very possible. Okay, blocks are at the base of the pyramid. Now what? How do you get them all the way to the top? Well, there are two main theories here: ramps and levers. On the one hand, archaeologists have actually found evidence of ancient ramps near quarries. And some folks have shown how a system of posts and ropes on a ramp could have worked. On the other hand, some people think they used a kind of lever system, a bit like a tool they already had called a shaduf for lifting water out of the Nile. Honestly, it's pretty likely they used a clever combination of both. So let's talk about the mysteries that are still left. Because even with all these really plausible theories, and they probably get a lot of it right, they don't solve everything, not by a long shot. The Great Pyramid is still holding on to some seriously deep, baffling secrets that they make you question what we think was even possible back then.
And here's probably the biggest paradox of all, the timeline. We're pretty sure the whole pyramid was built in about 20 years. Okay, but for that to happen, the workers would have had to quarry, move, and perfectly set one of these multi-ton stone blocks every 3 minutes. Every 3 minutes, 24/7, for 2 decades straight. Just think about that. Even with all their tricks, wet sand, ramps, that pace is it seems impossible. The logistics are absolutely mind-boggling. Let's go back to the materials for a second. You've got 5.5 million tons of limestone, 8,000 tons of granite, and a whopping 500,000 tons of mortar. That's right, mortar. It's a huge part of the pyramid structure. But that mortar, it's a whole other mystery. So here's the crazy part. Our scientists today, they know exactly what's in that ancient mortar, chemically speaking. They have the recipe, but they can't replicate it. We can't make it today. The original stuff is stronger and way more durable than our modern concrete, and it's part of the reason the pyramid has survived earthquakes for thousands of years. How in the world they made it is still a complete chemical mystery. But maybe the most stunning mystery of all is just the precision. I mean, the sheer accuracy of it. The base is almost perfectly flat, and its 4 sides line up with the cardinal points: true north, south, east, and west, with an error of just 1/15 of a degree. 1/15! That kind of accuracy would be impressive to achieve today with all of our modern tech. So how did they do it? They didn't have a compass. They obviously didn't have GPS. There are theories, of course. Maybe they used shadows on the equinox or tracked the stars with incredible care. But the truth is, nobody knows for sure how they nailed that level of astronomical alignment. It's just a stunning testament to how well they understood the sky and the principles of geometry. You know, when you're faced with mysteries this deep, it's easy to jump to some wild conclusions, right? Aliens, lost technologies, that kind of stuff. Or we can do what science does best. We can acknowledge the facts that we do know, based on the evidence, and then we clearly lay out what we don't know. And that's not admitting defeat, that's creating a roadmap for future generations to try and solve the puzzle. At the end of the day, the Great Pyramid stands as this incredible monument to human ingenuity. It really forces us to look at the limits of our own knowledge and ask a pretty big question. If we were this wrong for this long about what the ancient Egyptians were capable of, what else are we completely underestimating about the ancient world?